Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of People in Legal. I am really delighted and excited to have Matt from Lupl with me here today. I've known Matt since around 2021. I got to speak to him about the work that he was doing with Lupl and have followed his journey since then. So delighted to have you here with us today, Matt, and looking forward to speaking with you.
Yeah, great. Thank you, Colin. Thanks for having me.
Excellent. So Matt, what we'll do is we'll go into a couple of questions and curious really about you and your journey, because I know that you started off your journey as a lawyer, and now you moved into, obviously, from a technology and go-to-market perspective with Lupl. So I'm curious, maybe if you could share a little bit about that journey and how you've gone through it so far.
Yeah, absolutely. So you're right. I started off as a lawyer. I was a media and technology lawyer, qualified in the UK with a law firm called Olswang, which has since merged with a firm called CMS, and loved it. Was practicing media law, was practicing tech law. The first thing I worked on as a lawyer was a movie called Slumdog Millionaire, which you may have heard of.
Yeah.
It won 9 Oscars, and I like to say that if there was an Oscar for photocopying, I would have been right. I would have been right up there on the stage as a trainee lawyer. But loved it. Loved the work that I was doing. Spent about half my career as a lawyer in London, and then we opened a Singapore office and had an opportunity to move out there and help to set up our tech, media, and telecoms practice in Southeast Asia. Spent about 7 years out there in Singapore. I made partner after about 5 years, and obviously that was a big change and a big transition. Was a partner for, I think, 4 or 5 years, and then started to want to try something different, wanted to try something new. As a tech lawyer, you work a lot with startups, and really wanted to have a go at building something. And so got involved in some discussions about a project which ultimately became Lupl, which we launched back in 2020.
Amazing. And maybe for all the listeners, maybe can you give us a brief description of Lupl and what it does and how it works? Would be really interesting.
Yeah, absolutely. So at its simplest, Lupl is a task management system for lawyers. So the problem we solve is really that as lawyers, we don't have a system for planning, for organizing, for tracking our work. We have a lot of systems. We have systems for documents, we have systems for billing, but when it comes to actually managing the work, we don't have anything. And that's in contrast to other industries. If you think about the world of software engineering, they have Jira, and the world of marketing, they have tools like Asana or Monday.com or ServiceNow if you're in IT support. But lawyers, basically, we have Outlook, and we use it like a project management tool where we're flagging emails in our inbox, we're emailing ourselves. And then when it gets too much to manage in Outlook, we start building these trackers in places like Word or Excel, which are super clunky. And so we started really, 2020, solving that problem and saying, can we take legal work out of these clunky systems and try and put it into a collaborative, digital, more dynamic task management system, specifically designed for lawyers. And we were fortunate to get backing from a number of international law firms, who are our, to this day, our investors, and our biggest customers.
Amazing, excellent. And can you tell me a little bit about what exactly your role is within Lupl, and then maybe talk a little bit about some of the challenges that you're faced with and how you overcome them?
Yeah, sure. So I'm the Chief Product Officer at Lupl. So my job basically is to set the product vision, and to manage a team of people who are much smarter than me, who refine the product and actually build and maintain the platform. At one point or another, and I think one of the great things about working in a startup is you do a bit of everything. I mean, you've done this, Colin, but in the Clio days, you end up doing pretty much every role. So at one time or another, I've been frontline support, I've been customer success, I've been marketing and product designer and all of these different things. And I've loved that. You know,
Yeah.
you're constantly drinking from the fire hose and learning new things. But these days very much product. I'm a product guy and absolutely love all things all things product.
Excellent. And how often do you speak with customers or potential customers out in the marketplace as part of your role? Is that an important feature and function of the role?
It is, yeah. So it's a really good question. I would like to do even more than I do. And you know, I constantly encourage my team to talk to customers as well, because I think what we found for a while was the product team didn't necessarily see it as central to their role to talk to customers. We had a customer success team who did that, and we had a sales team who were talking to the prospects. And what we found was the feedback that was coming through was sort of secondhand feedback. So it would be somebody in the sales team saying, yeah, I spoke to this prospect last week and they really want this feature. And so you input it into a feedback tracking system and you say, yep, another vote for this particular feature. But what you miss there, I think, is all the nuance around it. You know, they may be asking for that feature, but why? Like, what problem is that solving? If you can't speak to the customer, you can't dig into that. I also think a lot is lost in the body language of it. So again, if you're getting someone in your sales team saying they asked for this, that could range from they would absolutely buy the platform tomorrow if you only had this feature, or it could mean they already love the platform and this would be a nice to have, or it could mean they're totally not interested in the platform and it's sort of a throwaway remark. So I probably don't do as much of it as I should. I try to do more of it. But I think it's the most important thing in a product role is actually to listen to the customer and get the voice of the customer. And I guess the last thing I'll just say on that is it's different personas. So, you know, as you know, it's the buyer persona and the user, and their wants and their needs, particularly I think in legal tech, they're not always the same. They're not always the same wants and needs. You know, the buyers might want to see more powerful analytics and reporting, but actually the end user on a Thursday morning who's trying to get a project completed, they're not necessarily interested in a shiny dashboard. They just want a really simple feature for sharing a task or an update or something like that.
Yeah. I think having that, you know, the conversations with the customers and getting the context and the why, as you say, is so important, and trying to pull a thread on that sometimes with them to peel back, you know, get really under the hood and understand the rationale behind it, what the value is going to be for the business if they had it, how would it be used. And to your point, you know, the buyer is a little bit different from the user, right? And I think you do have to try and get those conversations across multiple parts of the business when possible to really understand those level of detail. It can only help, right?
Agreed. And you know, the other thing I'd say is we had fantastic product designer, and her catchphrase was, "We are not our users." And I think there's a tendency when we're all users of a product to think that our experience is reflective of our users' experience. I really want to have a feature that does this, you know. But I'm not a paralegal in the employment group at an international law firm. I'm not a partner in the real estate practice, and I'm not using it for the work that they use it for. So we've ended up spending a lot more time on product research and user research in the kind of formalized way. That's been a big breakthrough for us. I think in the early days, we built too many things based on what we thought we knew. And now we go into it much more accepting that we basically know nothing. And you've got to get it in front of the user, not necessarily ask them what they'd like, but put what you're planning to build in front of them and observe how they interact with it, what they like, what they don't understand. It's the smallest things where you think it's a home run that they're going to understand this feature. And you're sat there on a call with them, observing them, and you can just see the confusion on their face. They've no idea which button to press. And so it's tricky because always you want to build stuff and get it released, right? You know, particularly our sales team would love us to churn out a new feature every day. And you have to rein yourself in a bit and be like, we need to actually spend a bit of time listening to people first, before we just jump into the next shiny new feature.
Yeah, and I think having like hypotheses are important, but you do want them validated or invalidated by going out to the user groups and using that data to be a bit more informed in your thinking.
Yeah.
To
Agreed.
follow on from that, how do you foster, a culture of innovation at Lupl? Because, sometimes in companies it can be seen as, oh, that's the product's job to be thinking innovatively. And other companies try and encourage everybody to think differently and innovatively. How do you go about doing that within Lupl?
It's almost counterintuitive, I guess, in a way, in that I've found that it's not very hard to get people to be innovative. If you define, excuse me, if you define innovative as coming up with new ideas, I've found, particularly when it comes to product, there are an endless number of new ideas. So I'm not sure a day has gone past in the last 3-4 years where I haven't had a feature idea from a member of the team. And that's, they might be a member of the product team, or they might be a member of the sales team, or frankly, HR team. Everybody has ideas for the product. I think where I try to get people to focus is on the problem. So I've always found people are really good at just coming up. You do a brainstorming session, people are brilliant at coming up with ideas. Ideas are the easy part. It's almost saying, let's spend an hour before we start jumping into ideas, talking about what problem are we actually trying to solve. And so I've really tried to get people to spend more time on the problem space. But it's hard because, when you're around a whiteboard, whether it's a virtual one or a physical one, the fun part is not really zooming in on why does a partner want to be able to track the progress of their real estate matter, and spending an hour really sort of trying to understand why she's got this problem. And but you have to rein yourself in, because you start jumping to, oh, we could have a slider, we could have a tracker, we could have a pie chart or a graph or an automation that does this. And you have to say, no, like, we're going to get to all of that fun stuff in a minute, but let's actually make sure we're solving for it. So I think otherwise you end up with a bunch of solutions in search of a problem. And as I look back, we're now on the second generation version of Lupl. And as I look back on version 1, which rolled out in March 2020, too much of it was based on, solutions. Some of them were solving real big problems, but sometimes they were solutions more in search of a problem. And so that's really something that we've hammered home in this second generation version in our whole approach is, let's identify the problem, spend the right amount of time on that, and then start having fun with the shiny solutions and prototyping and that sort of stuff. So it's kind of counterintuitive, but that's how I see innovation is. There's no point just ideas for the sake of ideas. It's got to solve a problem.
Yeah, and add value. And I think that then percolates across all parts of the business, because if that's your approach, then how you can go out and position that value to your prospects and to your customers becomes a little bit easier, because you've been thinking about the value piece from the very get-go, rather than oh, we have this feature, now you got to figure out how to position it and how to sell the value of it, right?
I honestly think it's the biggest missing thing in most SaaS is what problem is this solving? If there's no problem, there is no sale. If there's no problem, there is no usage. We're not selling video games which are just fun to play with. It doesn't really solve a problem. It's more of a it's more of a sort of candy. It's an enjoyable thing to interact with. I think in most B2B SaaS, you're trying to sell a ventilator. You're trying to sell something that solves a problem. And if you don't start with the problem, you're not going to get a sale. Your website's probably going to suck, because it's just going to be a list of features that don't really zoom in on the problem. Your whole sales playbook and your demos and everything are going to suck. So again, probably something we didn't do well in the first version of Lupl, but something that we've tried to focus on a lot more in this second version.
But that's fantastic that you personally and as a company have gone through that learning and that evolution. as opposed to assuming that everything is right and everything is working and everything is as we want it to be. I think having that flexibility in your approach and in your thinking is really important to continue to grow and evolve as the market evolves and market expectations change and law firms' expectations change, because there is so much technology out there, and abundance of it. And as to your point, a lot of it is not necessarily taking the approach of trying to solve problems. And ultimately, when you have somebody on the phone or on a demo or you meet them at a conference, ultimately all they care about are the problems that you can solve or the improvements that you can make within the business that they're trying to run and grow and deliver on. Right? Ultimately,
I
that's
totally
what they're.
agree. And you know what? I think it applies equally to legal advice. I know on this podcast, you're talking to lawyers as well as legal tech.
Yeah.
And I think often the training that in the past has been given at law school has been write an essay on this subject, show how much you know about limitations of liability. And that translates into, I think, a lot of junior lawyers coming through and providing advice, which is, look how much I know about this topic, and here's a long email. And actually, it's not what the client wants. The client wants an answer to a question, or they actually want a solution to a business problem. And so they, of course, they want to know that you've done the right research and that you know the law, but that's sort of a given. The first line of the email, and I sort of tried to hammer this into my team when I was a partner, needs to answer the question with ideally a yes or a no, or a specific solution to whatever the problem is. And so, yeah, no problem, no sale, no usage, no return client as a law firm. You've got to be solving a problem.
I think that's fantastic advice for people who are out there starting or have started any kind of a technology business or SaaS business, to really think about that today rather than trying to think about it in 6 months' time when you're getting ready to launch. Right? So thank you for sharing that from the learnings, which is brilliant.
Yeah.
Going back to your role as a senior leader, how do you prioritize and manage your time on a day-to-day basis?
It's a good question. I'd love to say that I've come up with the answer to inbox zero, and I've got an automation which answers all my emails for me. And so I guess all I can say on that is I think it's probably more about being more decisive about what you don't do, rather than having a great system for doing things that you probably shouldn't be doing in the first place. I think it's easier as you get a bit more senior, because you can choose a little bit more what you say yes to and what you say no to. And that is definitely harder if you're a junior lawyer or you're in more junior role in a tech company. But I definitely think saying no to things is a part of the answer. I'll give it. I attended a seminar, I don't know, 4 or 5 years ago, and it talked about a framework called "Will it make the boat go faster?" I don't know if you've heard it. Have you heard of this or not?
No, I haven't, but it sounds
Okay,
brilliant.
it's a rowing thing. I'm not a rower.
Yeah.
Terrible. I think I maybe rowed once on a machine, but I was inspired by this guy, and he was talking about he's an ex-Olympic rower, gold medalist, and at the Atlanta Olympics in '96, Team GB did really badly. I don't think we maybe won 1 medal or something, and his boat did really badly. And so they decided after that day that in the run-up to the Sydney Olympics in whatever it was, 2000, that they would every day ask themselves, will it make the boat go faster? Whatever it was that was coming their way, whether it was, hey, are you going to come for a run this morning? Will it make the boat go faster? Probably yes. So probably going to do it. Do you want to come to the pub for 8 pints on Friday evening? Is it going to make the boat go faster? Probably not. So I'm going to skip it. And so it's just quite a simple way of, when you're getting a bunch of inputs or requests coming your way, whatever making the boat go faster means for you, I found that to be quite a useful framework. It hasn't improved my rowing, but it's been a useful way of prioritizing stuff.
Excellent. I love it. I'm going to go out and buy that book. I think it's fascinating how so much learning from sports, particularly high performance sports, translates and transfers into the world of business. I'm a big believer in like the theory of marginal gains. So finding 1% improvements across all stages in your process can have an enormous impact in your business, or in your in what you're doing on a daily basis. And that came obviously from Team GB many years ago, and the thinking around it. So it's really, really interesting how all these sports books and sports coaches and athletes can share their learnings, to help us to improve. So I'll send you over a couple of recommendations as well of some books that have had an impact on me.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more.
But rowing, I did try rowing when I was younger. My dad was a fairly good rower. It wasn't for me. I was okay being in a boat by myself, but when I started going in with 3 or 4 other people, you're depending on them to deliver as well. And yeah, didn't wasn't for me. But I enjoy watching it, particularly at the moment, because we're doing okay.
Yes, yeah, indeed.
What do you think has been one of your most important lessons that you've learned in your career? Because obviously you've spanned various different roles and different, not necessarily different industries, but I'm just curious about some key learnings that you've picked up along the way.
Yeah, gosh, I've learned a lot in the last 3 or 4 years because in some senses, I've made the jump from tech law to law tech.
Yeah.
That's been a huge. That's a much bigger jump than the name suggests. So some of what I've just shared, I think, are some of the learnings from the last 4 years. Excuse me. In terms of other practical things, I guess I'll try and come up with really tactical things here. And I'd say one thing I learned early on was always ask the dumb question. So I shared an office with a partner. I think he's an M&A partner, and one of the things I observed about him was, we'd be sat on a big conference call, and somebody on the call would say something, and you'd look around the room, or there'd be this just moment of silence on the call, and there was that split second where not everybody understood exactly what had just been said. And oftentimes people don't want to be the one to say, sorry, what do you mean? Or when you say X, what can you just clarify what you mean? Because you worry that you're going to look dumb. But every single time, without fail, he would be the one to say, when you say X, what do you actually mean? And the number of times, I mean, I think almost 100% of the time, it was clear that nobody else on the call had a clue what this person had the point they just made. And actually, sometimes the person who had made the point was just sort of saying something for the sake of saying something, and they didn't really have a clear message to make. So I know that's really specific, but I thought, go something a bit more specific than general. It's just ask the dumb question. If you're not clear on something, ask. And often, it's worth doing. The other stuff is, I always tried when I was a junior lawyer to try and learn one thing from each person I was working with. And that was one example. But it might be a really micro thing, like how they write, or their body language on calls, or it might be a more macro thing. I always tried to sort of learn one thing from everybody I worked with. But yeah, most of the lessons recently have been the things I've just shared. The mistakes and learnings I've made as a product leader over the last 3-4 years.
Love that practical advice, particularly around asking the dumb question. A couple of years ago, one of my colleagues was always the last to speak in meetings. So generally, as a result, was the most informed person sharing an opinion, because he'd waited for every single other person to share theirs and ask their questions. And that was a fantastic learning for me as well, was to try and take in as much information as possible before forming opinions or before sharing anything, because you learn so much from what other people are thinking and different perspectives as a result as well. So,
and I think often in the world of business, when we're on calls or when we're talking, we're all trying to, there's almost a culture in business of trying to sound impressive, or whether you're using corporate jargon, or just talking about a topic. Let's circle back on this. Let's loop around on X. And actually half the time, nobody actually knows what the outcome is or what the suggestion is. We're smiling and nodding about it. And so, yeah, this guy was just absolutely no nonsense. Yeah, but what does that actually mean? What are you actually saying? I found that to be really useful.
Excellent. No, I think that's great. I'm going to keep that in mind for sure. How do you stay informed? So legal tech, the industry is growing at such an enormous rate and fast pace, particularly over the course of the last 12 to 18 months. How do you stay informed about the various industry trends and developments? Because there's so much information. I'm just curious, how do you get key pieces of information in a timely manner without being overwhelmed with just data and data sources?
Yeah, no, I think there's kind of two bits to that. One is trying to stay focused on what you're doing. And I think your question at the start about, do you talk to customers? Do you spend enough time talking to customers? I mean, in some senses, that's the best place to start, because that's what's really happening now. They're working on a legal project today, and they're trying to solve for something today. And the fact that Thomson Reuters has just made another acquisition, isn't necessarily going to be the thing that I should be worrying about. I should be worrying about that. So I do think staying, again, from a product perspective, staying focused on the user. In terms of other stuff, there are some great influencers out there. There are people who post updates. Obviously, Colin, I put you in that category.
Thank you.
But there are others like obviously Richard Troman's Artificial Lawyer, Caroline Hill, Legal IT Insider, Nikki Shaver from Legal Tech Hub. There are these folks out there who are really tuned into what's going on. So if I were a junior lawyer or junior person in legal tech company wanting to skill up, I'd start on LinkedIn, start following those people, and go from there. But it's hard. It is hard. There's so much going on, and it's day by day right now, isn't it? There's something new happening every day. From investments to acquisitions to new product launches, new solutions coming into the market. And by the way, all of the people that you mentioned, and I appreciate the call it, all of the people that you mentioned are those that I check in with, if not daily, at least a couple of times a week, because there's such great resources for quality information, and also I think context as well. To our talk earlier on, they give a lot of context to the industry and what's going on, both from a technology perspective, but also just from a wider industry perspective. On that note, do you have any thoughts with regard to where you think the industry is going to be in the next 5 years or so, and how is Lupl kind of preparing for those changes or evolutions? I'm going to say something really groundbreaking here and say AI is going to play a role. So I think that obviously it's the most transformational thing that's happened since probably the internet in our industry. So no getting away from that. And I think we're already impressed with the tools that are out there, and that these are as bad as the tools are ever going to be. So in 5 years with new models, it's going to be huge. I think that there's a bunch of things you can talk about here. I think one, the role of the junior lawyer and how's that going to change, and that comes up a lot. And it's across all industries. Are there going to be jobs for people coming out of law school? And I strongly feel that yes, there are. And I think that where people struggle with that is they're trying to fit a jigsaw puzzle piece in. Where's this this person going to fit in to the way the puzzle is today? And actually, the whole puzzle is changing. Every single piece is going to change. Stuff's going to move around. Clients are going to self-serve more on things. The way that legal work is performed is going to be completely transformed. And I think there will absolutely be roles for junior lawyers. I think they're going to be far more tech savvy than any of us were when we came out of law school. And they're almost going to be business analysts, product managers, as much as they are junior lawyers. but that doesn't mean there are not going to be roles there for them. I absolutely think that there are. But the last thing I was to say about the AI stuff is, so from a Lupl perspective, we're interested in the more than 50% of a lawyer's day that is not drafting or research. So there's tons of fantastic tools in the market that are focused on drafting, research, summarization of stuff,
Yeah.
which is fantastic. We're not going to play in that space because it's well served. But
Yeah.
actually, when you look at Lawyer's Day, they don't spend that whole day doing drafting and research. More than half their day is what we think of as the work about work, which is the planning, the scoping, the status reporting, the coordination stuff. And so our vision is to be the AI for the work about work, and to almost be a virtual legal project manager that's there by the side of the lawyer to help them get the matter from open to closed, to move things forward. And as part of that, we're trying to meet lawyers where they are. So whilst we've got native AI baked into our product now, we've just entered a partnership with Microsoft. And as you know, lawyers, we complain about it, but we live in the Microsoft stack. And so we've just entered a partnership with them around Copilot, which is basically about turning Copilot into your virtual legal project manager. It can tell you how to scope your matter, how to refine it, can tell you which members of your team are busy and who's overloaded and who might have capacity and that sort of stuff. So off to Singapore in a couple of weeks to go and announce that. Yeah, we're really excited about the potential for AI in that other half of a lawyer's day, which I feel like nobody else is really solving for.
Amazing. Very exciting, and congratulations on the partnership. It's going to be great. And I know you spent a good bit of time in Singapore, and I think that's how you and I first came across each other's paths because of that. And I just am fascinated with Singapore and how advanced they are in tech adoption within the world of legal, particularly, and how how progressive they are in their thinking and how they structure their organizations, both from a law society perspective and from law firms then as well. So really exciting to know that you're going back again. You're going to be announcing that partnership there, because I would imagine it will be well received.
Yeah, and you're absolutely right. They are ahead of the game. I think it's to me, it's the world leader in how government can partner with an industry like legal to drive digital transformation. I don't think any country does it as well as Singapore. So yeah, it's a model for, I think, others to follow.
Yeah, I think seeing Law Tech UK coming about in the last couple of years in the UK has been really exciting. I think it's showing a recognition that partnership is really important for advancing the industry and advancing the service delivery, advancing access to justice. Many topics are covered by really strengthening that partnership, and I think Law Tech UK has done some really good work in the industry as well, which is great. We'll see more of that as well. Couple more questions for you. So more so on a personal basis. So how do you achieve work-life balance? And you and I have talked about family and work life as well. How do you balance that on a day-to-day basis when you're working in such an exciting space with an exciting company across multiple markets, as both of us have done? So how do you go about that?
Yeah, so I guess this is what I'm supposed to say. I wake up at 5 a.m. for meditation and an ice bath, and run a marathon, and then protein shake, etc. So I'll be totally honest. I don't think I have solved that as well as I would like to have done. I'm not going to sit here and say I've solved work-life balance. It's really hard, and I think some things that I've observed is, in some ways, things have got better for me personally, and I think for a lot of people since the pandemic, right? So the ability to work from home. We're a fully remote business. We don't have an office anywhere in the world, physical office, and so everybody works from home, and we support flexible working, and that's worked really well for us, and it's worked really well for me personally. So I've got two young kids, and I actually am up at 5 a.m., but not for the meditation, but I'm up with them. And that's, that's okay because I don't have to get the 6:30 a.m. to London straight after. So I think that's been good. I think as a startup founder, it's really stressful and hard. Like just, I think from the outside, the world of startups can seem pretty, I won't say glamorous, that's totally the wrong word, but it can seem like a really shiny and fun thing to do. And in some ways it is, but there are hard things about it. And that I think the highs are higher and the lows are lower than when you're working in a big company. And you tend to take everything much more personally than you would. So, you'll have on Friday evening, something will go wrong, and that can affect your weekend if you're not really careful. But then on Monday morning, a new customer signs, and everything's fantastic, and you have these highs and these lows. And I try to be a bit more stoic about it these days, and try not to take things as personally. And then try to get busy outside of work as well. I think it's not so much about trying to do less work or have a hard cut-off on things. It's more, how do you get into some activities outside of work and try and get busy with that. And I think Dom Conte from Avail, who's a UK real estate legal tech startup, he had some good advice about, you've got to fill up your cup, if you like, with other things. And I totally agree with that. So for me, it's I'm running these days, trying to get out there and run more. But for others, it'll be something totally different. And I think it's about finding that thing that helps you stay busy outside of work as much as anything else.
Yeah, I think that's brilliant, and it is making sure that the time that you have outside work is valuable and enriching. Whatever that looks like. Obviously having kids. You've got 2 kids. I've got Ellie, my daughter. That takes up a lot of time, but also I think making sure finding some time for yourself as well. I do a bit of running as well. Do some cycling. Make sure I spend time with family and friends as well, because time is precious, particularly with kids when they're growing up, because it happens so fast, and they're taking on more and more activities. So you want to have the biggest impact as well. Any one last question for you, and then happy to wrap up. So any advice for people looking to get into the legal tech space at such an exciting time in the industry?
I mean, I guess I'll answer that, targeted more at lawyers who might be thinking of making the jump. I'm obviously someone who, it's an unusual path because I jumped from being a partner in a law firm, and I think for some people, being a partner in a law firm is sort of the pinnacle for them, and they wouldn't ever want to do anything else. And that wasn't it for me. I wanted to learn something new. And I would just encourage anybody who's a lawyer, who's got that passion for doing something a little bit more entrepreneurial, to give it a try, and to make that jump. I'd say lawyers are uniquely well placed to know the problems. And again, going back to what I said earlier, it is all about solving a problem. And if you don't know the problem really deeply, you're not going to succeed. They know the problems. They're there every day working on legal projects, and they are uniquely well placed to come up with ideas that really solve for something. And so I would encourage people to make that jump. I think as lawyers, we're trained to be really, it's a bit of a cliche, but we are somewhat risk averse, because we're trained to be very analytical and to weigh up all the pros and all the cons and the risks of something. But I think actually, the truth is you can make the jump from being a lawyer to doing something else. And if it doesn't work out, you're probably going to be a better lawyer at the end of it. If you decide to go back, you absolutely can do that. It's not like you're going to lose all of your skill and your training. You're going to pick up something new and start. I guess, my last suggestion on this is, I think we can all be builders today, right? We can all build stuff. I can write a little bit of code, but I'm not an engineer. But with the functionality and the latest versions of Claude or GPT-4o and those other things,
Yeah.
anybody can create a prototype of an application, and that's enough for an MVP. I or someone not super technical, we can build an MVP of something. And so I just encourage a lawyer who's listening to this to give it a try, build something, put it in front of people, and see if you're solving a problem. But yeah, I think we can all be builders now.
Yeah, it's a different landscape, really. It really is, and very exciting. So thank you for your advice. I really appreciate it. Matt, appreciate your time. Really much. Great to see you again. Hopefully next time I'm in London, which is probably in the next couple of weeks, we get to meet up for a coffee and a chat face to face again. Would really like that. So thank you so much. It's been great
Colin,
having you on board.
thanks for having me. Really appreciate it. Great to catch up.
Cheers.